Hello, and thank you for watching. At Simulation Training Systems, our programs are highly interactive, facilitator-led, experiential training programs. Today, we'll be exploring our cross-cultural diversity and inclusion simulation, BaFa BaFa. We'll start out at the ground level, explaining the why behind the origin of BaFa BaFa, the importance of the simulation, and how it is used with organizations. We'll then take you through how the simulation is led, and we'll finish with a number of outcomes that we've seen BaFa BaFa produce. In all our years of running BaFa BaFa, we've encountered countless ways in which cultures differ for both individuals and organizations. While it is impossible to highlight all these ways, here are some of the more common. I'm sure these are many of the issues you've faced in the workplace. You may also note that many of our cultural differences are unconscious rather than conscious. Behavioral psychologist Dr. Garry Shirts developed BaFa BaFa with the intention of not only making participants aware of how profoundly cultural differences can impact the behavior of people in an organization, but to take an actionable step further for individuals to be inspired by the energy and creativity that comes out of cultures coming across common problems and utilizing their individual experiences to solve that problem. Since BaFa BaFa is an interactive simulation, it allows individuals to examine how stereotypes are developed, barriers created, and misunderstandings magnified. BaFa BaFa can be used with any groups who perceive they have cultural differences. It's used to help individuals understand each other better and to be more productive and effective at work. Some of the most common ways it's been used are to prepare people to live or work in other cultures, to work with people from other cultures, to help different businesses understand one another, to prepare for a merger or an organizational change. And some of the most common groups who've utilized BaFa BaFa have been men and women, management and labor, ethnicity and race, age and generations, doctors, nurses and patients, students and faculty members. The list goes on. The reason why BaFa BaFa is so effective is because it creates an engaging, memorable environment that creates the teachable moments through the time-tested safe activity. Teachable moments that are not likely gained from lectures. Participants gain insight into the way stereotypes are developed, barriers created, and misunderstandings magnified. BaFa BaFa creates a jumping point to open participants up to considering cultural differences and diversity in a new way. BaFa BaFa prepares participants to learn more about specific cultural differences and how this knowledge can help the organization. Next, we will go through a high-level explanation of how we facilitate the program to instill the why through the simulation. After the participants learn the rules of their culture and begin living it, observers and visitors are exchanged. The resulting stereotyping, misperception, and misunderstanding becomes the grist for the debriefing. We create a problem for all the participants. We require them to live and interact in another culture. We then ask them how they felt when they were in the foreign culture. They generally report feeling lost, overwhelmed, invisible, etc. We then ask what strategies they adopted to cope with those feelings, and they report such behaviors as trying to escape, discounting the other culture, dropping out psychologically, insulting them, etc. Most simulations are divided into two sections, the simulation proper and a session analyzing the results. Conscious learning occurs primarily during the analysis session. Whenever trainees disavow responsibility for their behavior during the simulation, learning is sidetracked. If they can claim they did what they did only because the simulation suggested or encouraged that action, their motivation to learn from the experience evaporates. BaFa BaFa is designed to remove these escape hatches and have participants take responsibility for their actions. Participants are randomly divided into two cultures, Alpha and Beta. From the outside looking in, both cultures look similar. Both have playing cards, chips, and interact using these artifacts. However, they are very different. Here's an overview of what happens in the simulation. It starts with all the participants in one room. The participants are divided into two separate cultures, the alpha culture and the beta culture. Each group is then moved into separate rooms. The alpha and beta cultures both have the characteristics of their new culture explained to them. They then get an opportunity to practice amongst themselves. After the participants feel comfortable with their new cultural rules and norms, an observer is chosen from each culture to briefly visit the other culture to observe and try to gain an understanding of the other culture. Observers and visitors are not allowed to ask questions about the rules of the other culture. After a brief period of time, the observers return to their culture and report what they experienced. Each group will then make inferences about the other culture based off the report of the observer. Inevitably, each observer sees the other culture through the lens of their own culture and creates faulty assumptions, which act as a starting point for misunderstanding of the other culture. Then each group will exchange a set of visitors to try to figure out the other culture. There are 3 sets of visitors, each with approximately 1/3 of the members of the culture. The visitors are different than the observer, as they are given the artifacts of the other culture and asked to participate, not just observe. After a short period of time, the visitors return to their own culture, explain their experiences, and build on the earlier information they have to try to understand the other culture. Because of the differences in cultural rules and norms, there are often interesting situations which occur and are misunderstood. For instance, for betans visiting alpha, they are unaware of the social rules and norms, like personal space, approaching the wrong status of person, being too aggressive playing games, etc. And they often break the rules or inadvertently insult the alphans. For alphans visiting beta, they don't understand that there are no social rules and norms and often feel taken advantage of or find the language strange or feel the locals are rather aggressive, which leads to interesting experiences. These types of situations often lead to faulty assumptions about what is truly happening in the other culture. The second set of visitors experiences the other culture, returns to their culture, and discuss, continuing to build upon earlier experiences and assumptions. When everyone has had a chance to visit and report on the other culture, the simulation portion ends. At this time, both cultures are confident that they've figured out the rules of the other culture. To finish up, both cultures will return to one room to discuss and analyze the results, assumptions, and explanations of their cultures. First, each culture will be guided through a discussion to explore the perceptions, feelings, and ideas generated by the simulation experience and generate data for a small group discussion, how participants felt when they visited the other culture, and how everyone coped. Finally, the cultures merge to ask questions about the rules of the other culture. The small group discussions naturally invite individuals to question the rules of the other culture and provide an opportunity for them to learn. Once everyone's questions have been answered to determine what each other's cultures entailed, they are then prompted to discuss the types of questions they asked during the debrief. The purpose then becomes to find ways to create the kind of organizational culture that supports its mission, vision, values, goals, and practices without discounting or humiliating those from various cultures. Prompted questions include, but are not limited to, what kind of questions were the most effective? What questions made them feel good? Which ones offended or didn't offend? Now let's discuss the outcomes. Each group almost never fully understand and are usually very far off from the characteristics of the other group. Since the original observers started their journey unknowingly using assumptions from their own culture to explain the behavior of the other culture, they invariably report faulty information that then influences the rest of the group. The experience initiates immediate personal change and makes participants personally aware of the issues around diversity, inclusion, and cultural awareness. It motivates participants to rethink their behavior towards others while examining their own bias. These realizations help identify cultural awareness and diversity issues within the organization, which should be addressed. Here are some sample outcomes. What seems logical, sensible, important, and reasonable to a person in one culture may seem irrational, stupid, and unimportant to an outsider. It's important to check out assumptions when interacting with people from another culture. Otherwise, one may draw many false conclusions that end up hurting the relationship. We tried to understand the other culture by using our own culture as a frame of reference, and consequently, we totally misunderstood them. We concluded that it is best not to try to relate everything in the new culture to our own culture. If we must compare and contrast, we should focus on the similarities as well as the differences. There are probably people in the workplace who feel the strangeness and awkwardness that we felt when we visited the other culture. But until you feel it yourself, you're likely to discount it as unimportant or insignificant. We'll begin to make progress in understanding one another when we realize that most of us are from another culture in one way or another. From the facilitator's perspective, BaFa BaFa is time-tested, memorable, and engaging. BaFa BaFa is a reliable addition to every trainer's toolbox. BaFa BaFa helps organizations create awareness and move into action. Professional BaFa BaFa is purchased in two pieces: a reusable director's kit with everything needed for the facilitator's portion, and one set of consumable participant materials for each person going through the program. So for example, if you're planning to conduct a training session for 30 participants, you'll need to have one director's kit and 30 sets of participant materials. The participant materials are pre-sorted, easy to use, and include all the materials each person needs to participate in the simulation. Be sure to contact us to learn more or to place your order. Thank you for your time.